Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of AVANT-GARDE-GRASP. I hope you all are staying safe and warm. I'm Shivatmika.
And hi, I am Sahasra. We welcome you to today's episode, which we promise is going to be fun as well as informative. Starting with something fun. Shivatmika di, have you watched the Netflix show Sex Education?
Yes, it was absolutely fun.
I loved the show as well. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that students in some part of the globe are receiving practical sex ed classes, either from the school curriculum or from friends like Otis. So there was this scene included in the show where they were being taught to learn how to use a condom through a penis model. Now it's not like we didn't receive any education about contraceptives. हामीले पनि त घोकेकै हो होइन कन्डमको कम्पोजिसन एडभान्टेजेस डिसएडभान्टेजेस अनि एक्जाममा घोकेको कुरा लेखेको पनि हो होइन तर डिफ्रेन्स चाहिँ कहाँनिर आयो भन्दा आई होप आई क्यान सेयर दिस इन्सिडेन्ट.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, a few years back in school, we had to clean this nearby river. And while we were at it, one of my friends found a used condom, and assuming that it was some birthday balloon, she picked it up with her bare hands. I mean, to be fair to her, it did look like a balloon, you know. The point being, the way we get educated on these matters is very lacking and just limited to exam ma ki answer likhne, and overall ma has a skyrocketing difference, and apparently it does show in the way we tend to stigmatize our own reproductive organs and its overall physiology. Now back to the series. We all aren't as lucky as the students there to get a friend like Otis, who received his age appropriate sex education from his mother, who happens to be a sex therapist in the show. So we kind of remain unknown to the world of sex education, if I put it that way, right?
Yes, absolutely. Ani, I would like to point out this, Sunsani, the way we represent sex in general, along with menstruation, sexuality, and gender norms in popular media culture, does have influence in how we currently view these things, Pani. Ani, in South Asian pop culture, they are generally portrayed as taboos or sexist jokes, right? Our society has repeatedly been stigmatizing sex, and through inadequate sex education, things are likely to remain the same in the future generation as well.
Yes, absolutely. Personally, I've grown up watching a lot of misrepresentations, one of which was the portrayal of periods by sanitary pad commercials. So, as a child, I used to think, what is this blue liquid and why do women need to
Oh
soak it up?
no. Hmm.
And recently, I got to know that the popular brand of sanitary pads, Whisper, right, is
Yeah.
literally named Whisper. So I
Hmm.
think it's high time we stop whispering and start talking like our periods were equivalent to some weather report.
Yes, yes, absolutely well said. Moving on, I would like to point out that we took an online survey to access the level of sex education that we are currently receiving, and over 100 people from Nepal and India took part in it. And we were disappointed, but not surprised that there were a lot of questions in which majority of answers were far from correct, clearly showing
Mm.
our education system has failed us. Therefore,
Yeah.
this made it apparent that it is much wiser to let the kids of age know about the different aspects of sex education through professional teaching and learning, instead of letting them switch to unreliable sources on the internet and elsewhere. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our guest speaker. Joining us today, we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Tanaya Narendra, who is also known as Dr. Cuterus on the internet. Hello, Dr. Tanaya. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi there, thank you so much for having me. And yes, my name is Tanaya. I'm a medical doctor. I'm also called Dr. Cuterus, which is my Instagram account. And yeah, I talk a lot about sexual health on the internet,
It's
medical
nice. Thank
education.
you. Dr. Cuter is such a cute, lovely name. What is the backstory behind this name?
Thank you. I love the uterus, given everything. I am a big fan of the uterus, and I do a lot of I see a lot of these memes about how the uterus is angry and the uterus sucks and PMS is awful and periods are awful. And I was like, you know what? The uterus is cute as hell. It's very cute. I love it. And it's the most important organ in our body, more so than the brain and the heart, in my opinion, because without the uterus, we wouldn't be here. Simply put, the uterus doesn't get enough credit, and the uterus gets a lot of bad light, and it's cute, so it became cuterus.
That was
That was actually a very cute backstory. Now, to begin with today's subject matter, when we decided to have a discussion on sexual education, we were a little lost so as to where to start from, as this topic is very huge and every aspect of it is equally important. So, we decided to conduct a survey with our friends to see what aspects it would be nice to cover on and what is actually necessary. So when we went back to the starting of sex education, which usually begins at home or in school. And what we found out was above 80% of people did not receive any form of sex education at home, including me, and around 40% of them did receive some form of basic reproductive education at school. Now, you are an advocate of sexual and reproductive health. Growing up, what was sexual and reproductive education for you? And do you think it played an important role in who you are today?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's fundamental in who I've become and how my message has shaped, and that's because my family has had a very non-judgmental, stigma-free approach to sexual health and sexual education. Both my parents are also doctors, and this is a household of fertility specialists. So, sex is not a conversation that was ever hidden, and I had age-appropriate sex education from the very get-go. When I was younger, my mother would say, in the shower, clean your vulva instead of saying clean your private parts or something of that sort. So, I think it's very important that we grow up in households that don't have the stigma, and we grow up in households where, it's not private
Mm,
parts.
yeah. That's really fortunate and so amazing to hear. In this era of the internet, it is so easy to find information about anything. And one of the elements which plays an important role in sex education online is pornography, right? And as we all are aware of how the majority of the porn industry tend to ignore women's pleasure, it's absolutely from the misogynistic mains gaze, right? If I must say. And this does lead to a wrong perspective on so many people. But now, on the bright side, there are different porn sites made by women for women, focusing on consent, realistic body images, and women's pleasure like Belesash.com and so many more. And we also have many amazing sex educators and sexual health experts like you now on the internet who play such a big role in defining this ongoing movement of sexual education. What do you think about this whole movement of sexual education development due to the internet?
I am super excited about it. I'm very happy about it, and um, there's a lot of excellent people that are driving this
Mhm.
movement forward and that have been working in this space for so many years, that has made it easier for people like me to come up and do a little bit more. And of course, I hope we can make the pathway easier for other people who want to go ahead, like you guys, and talk about these taboo
Yeah.
subjects.
well said. There will also be many false information prevalent on the internet. I remember this very popular trend I saw. Before meeting with your partner, drink tons of pineapple juice to taste good, referring to that of the genitals. And there are many such trends and information. So, how much of this information posted by such self care pages do you think are actually accurate and reliable?
um like the pineapple example, and they say if you eat asparagus, your semen will taste
Really?
bad. um you're very correct in identifying that it is disinformation and it is misinformation, but I know it comes from a good place. I know the people are trying to make a difference, And this is where we need to be very careful in who we follow and who we rely on, and what are the trustworthy sources. Because we have these these famous Instagram accounts and these famous YouTube accounts who are all influencers who don't have any scientific or medical training, and they go and talk about these things that they know nothing of. So it can create a space of very idiotic notions, for lack of a better word. The example that I tend to use here are two. In an international space, we can talk about this actress called Gwyneth Paltrow,
Mhm.
who has her own wellness company called
Mhm.
Goop. Gwyneth Paltrow is a very successful actress, and Goop is a very successful lifestyle brand, and they advocate for things like vaginal steaming, which not only have no medical benefits, but also may actually be harmful not in the long run, even in one go. So if we, you know, if we have more doctors and more educated people who come out there and call out this misinformation, people will know who to trust and who
Mhm.
not to trust.
Yeah.
On the similar lines, there's a famous Indian YouTuber called FitTuber who
Yes.
says that I don't know, if you put your bottle of water out in the moonlight for the entire night and drink it, then you get moon charged water, which will cure your
Oh
Yes.
God.
PCOS. So
I've heard that
he's an
too. Yes.
engineer.
I've seen that video.
So he's an engineer who has no medical education or any sort of nutritional education. That is, PCOS is an endocrine dysfunction. PCOS is not a menstrual irregularity. Um, so I know he comes from a place of goodness where he's trying to maybe either go viral or create more awareness around it. I don't know where it stems from, but
Mhm.
more often than not, these people end up doing bad other than good. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
we must be very selective on where we get our information from. Guys, please do follow Dr. Cuterus for right information.
Thank you.
And I want to share this event with you all. Like this happened about a year ago. I was at my neighbor's house, right? And some 10-year-old boys, they were playing downstairs, and suddenly they started getting into a very verbal fight. And to my surprise, those kids uttered very derogatory cuss words. And as the majority of the cuss
Oh
words
no.
go, they were targeted to women and transgender folks only. Again, coming
Oh,
back to our survey, even many 20-year-olds do not know the correct definition of sex, gender, and so much more. Basically, we are being regressive by teaching our children things that vilify marginalized groups, and at the same time, not teaching them the most basic things that one needs to know. So, at around what age do you think schools need to start, or like homes need to start teaching the most basic aspects of sex education like this one?
I feel like it has to be a lifelong journey and it has to start right in the
Mm-hmm.
childhood. Age appropriate sex education is extremely crucial, which basically means that, from the very get go, if you sit down one day with your, say, 10-year-old son, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to talk the birds and bees to you
Mm-hmm.
today, it becomes a topic. You don't want to make it a topic. You want to make it a part of regular conversation, and you want to have this very normalized. The minute you build up to it and create all of this, oh my god, my parents are giving me the talk
Mm-hmm.
today. The minute that happens, there is a lot of pressure, and it can also create a space for hesitation in both parties, and it can create a lot of awkwardness. Also, when children are younger, they do ask questions about, oh, what is this, why does this happen, what happens here. And if you don't answer them then, and if you shut them up then they become more
Mm-hmm.
curious. Anything that is taboo or anything that is not addressed is very, ooh, what's happening here. So there's a lot of curiosity, and they start inquiring and they start looking for information on their own, especially in this empowered world of the internet. And this can lead them to sources of more misinformation and more disinformation, which is why it's so important that we um, make, like, an elbow is an elbow. Then why is not a penis a penis? Why is penis your
Yeah.
nunu? It has to be penis where you pee from, and eventually this will play a role in making a baby. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. This is such a simple factual piece of advice for a say a 7-year-old child who's asking, what is this and what does this do?
Mm,
I suppose age appropriate sex education should be the way it is.
yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, doctor. Now, it is said that movies are the mirrors of the society. So recently, I watched Lost Stories, and there was this scene between the protagonist and a guy with whom she has just hooked up with. In a very satiric way, they have shown that the guy has never even heard of the word consent when she mentions it in the conversation. Also, from our survey, over 23% of people still have not acknowledged the fact that consent should be taken and cared for every time a sexual act is about to happen. What changes do you think proper knowledge of consent, along with other safe sexual practices, will bring in a social level?
Um, Consent is massive, and like you mentioned, consent and knowledge around consent is sorely lacking. The minute we start bringing in this element of consent, we also bring in the element of boundaries and
Mm,
respect in the bedroom, which is integral to um, safe and healthy sexual relationships. Because a lot of times, unsafe sexual practices stem from things like when there's a power dynamic.
mm,
I'm going to use an example, not a very routine example. I'm going to use an example of, say, a sex
mm,
worker. A sex worker is at a power dynamic where there is an exchange that's going to happen. And a lot of times, because sex workers, come from marginalized communities, or they work in an environment where sex work is illegal, uh, it automatically puts them at a disadvantage. And when they don't have that same level ground of in the playing field,
mm,
if they ask their customer for using condoms, then the customer can very easily refuse, and they can say, yeah, I'm not going to use a condom, and you can do nothing about it. And this is unfortunately how it goes down very, very heavily. They can do nothing about it because there is no respect, there is no boundary in that dynamic, because it is a power exchange. And going forward and using this example in young relationships, when there's a, say, 19-year-old girl and there's a 22-year-old boy, or there is a relationship where there is a older woman or a younger boy, or there is partners of the same sex but there's an age difference, or there's a power dynamic there, we need boundaries so much. We need soft boundaries, we need hard boundaries, and you need to learn to respect them. And this is, consent is, say, the first step towards building that respect for your partner and appreciating the boundaries of your partner.
yeah.
And it's one small step for mankind, one small step for man and a giant leap for mankind, essentially.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. There's a very big taboo on the talk of sex in our communities. I think Nepal and India have somewhat similar social and cultural aspect around it. And when you decided to advocate for sexual education on the internet, did you face any sort of criticism regarding your activism or even your name, maybe?
I still do.
Oh.
um if you're talking in offline world, there are a lot of doctors who don't think what I'm doing is appropriate or a wise decision for my future prospects. And a lot of medical students also sort of approach me with a very confused look, that why are you talking about anal sex? You're a doctor, where is your dignity? I don't know why I tend to lose dignity if I talk about anal sex. But there's a lot of opposition, there is a lot of um, friction around this. And the thing is that change takes effort,
Mhm.
and most people are uncomfortable with change. The the dynamic that has been set around the idea of sex and sexual health is that something this is not something we discuss. This is something that you go to a roadside clinic that has been advertised in the shady parts of the town.
Mm,
This is where you go and you talk about this. A well educated woman who studied at Oxford and has a medical degree and is a public person,
mm,
yeah, she can't talk about sex because that is taboo. um Online, of course, I talk about this very often. I get a lot of inappropriate
yeah.
messages, inappropriate pictures, inappropriate
Mm.
videos, inappropriate comments and things of that sort. So I'm not going to say it's very easy,
Mm,
but on the other hand, the response that I get from people, where nobody has told them this in factual terms before, and how helpful this has been for people. It the positives heavily outweigh the negatives,
Mm.
and it seems more fruitful.
Yes. Another thing about the lack of prior sexual education before having sexual relationships is maybe the lack of knowledge on the reproductive system as a whole as well. Even with my own personal experience, I know some people who were confused about how many orifices women have. Main confusion being, do we pee and menstruate from the same orifice, or where do we deliver the baby from? Have you had any such experience in your practice?
Oh, very often. I'm a very passionate and loud advocate for the use of menstrual cups.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people tend to get confused that how will I pee with the cup inside me, because people don't know that we have, there's different orifices for different activities. And then also the way the language is phrased, we call the uterus a reproductive organ and we call the vagina a reproductive organ,
Yeah.
whilst completely forgetting the role that the vagina and the clitoris play in sexual pleasure. The penis is more than just a reproductive organ. The penis is a urological organ, it helps you pee.
Mm.
The penis is a sexual organ, it helps you have sex. The penis is a reproductive organ because it can help, it's a tube that helps deliver the semen in the right place. But it's so much more. Calling the heart, I don't know, the plumbing, sorry, calling the heart the super highway of the body, without referring to how integral it is in maintaining our blood pressure and maintaining everything in the body, smooth functioning of the body, is doing a disservice to the heart.
Yeah.
If we don't refer to the heart as just an organ that pumps blood, why do we have to refer to the uterus as just an organ? Okay, maybe uterus is more specific to that,
Mm.
but why do we have to refer to the vagina as just an organ that's involved in reproduction?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
we need to challenge the language around it, and we need to actively advocate more for education around it.
Mm. Yeah. So, both of us here are medical students, and even with our own experiences of going to the gynecologist, we have had questions asked as to whether we are married or unmarried, referring to are we sexually active or not. And there are cases
Mhm.
when girls who are unmarried and sexually active visit their gynecologist and they tell them that they are involved in premarital sexual activities. The doctors refuse to treat them. This sort of response will lead to a very, very big hindrance in the medical practice, I think. And what are your views on this as a practicing medical professional?
There's definitely a lot of stigma around the idea of premarital sex in our societies, and this is not all right, because
Mm-hmm.
if you're not getting the right history as medical students, you would know how crucial history taking is to any medical diagnosis and treatment. A lot of the times you can find out without even touching the patient, you can find out what's happened to them, and you can find out how you can treat it. So, history taking is crucial to medicine. And if you don't get the right history, because if you don't ask the right questions, you can't treat your patients well. So, firstly, you're failing as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't ask the right question of are you sexually active, and you instead ask are you married. Secondly, there's a very heavy moral connotation there that, oh yeah, only married people can have sex, which is unfair to people who are of different sexualities,
Right.
who are not legally allowed to get married.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also unfair to people who don't want to involve the state in their relationship, which is
Yeah.
also fair. um Not everybody wants to get married even if they have a stable partner. And
Right.
these are just the two of the points that I'm touching on, completely not even going into the can of worms that is that you don't need to be married to have sex. That is an individual choice.
Mm-hmm.
But we it's so important that the way this is addressed is monitored, and it is dealt with nuance instead of just sticking to are you married or you're not married. Because you can have somebody who's walking into your clinic with an STI, but you ask
Mm.
them, are you married or not? And they say, I'm not. and you never inquire after their sexual status, and eventually this patient comes to you after being married with PID and infertility for 5 years.
Mm.
How do you deal with it then?
Yeah, right.
Yes, exactly. That made so much sense. Now, in a very popular medical textbook, which I guess almost every medical student reads at some point in their lives, it is implied that just married women will not be having hymen. And this statement itself is as problematic as it could get. So, once and for all, we would like to hear from you, a licensed medical practitioner, about the myths that surround hymen and virginity.
That is an excellent question, and I'm so glad we're talking about this. The hymen is has been explained to us that it's like the cap at the end of your water bottle. So if you turn your water bottle upside down, the
Mm.
cap is still intact. What we tend to forget is that, or we tend not to teach people, is that the hymen is not like the cap at the end of the water bottle. It's actually like a rubber band at the end of the water bottle.
Mm.
Like a hair tie, like a regular rubber band, there is a hole in the middle, and that is how menstrual blood comes out. If it were like a cap, take a full water bottle that has a cap at the end and turn it upside down. The water will not come out. The same way, if the water bottle is your vagina and at the end of it the cap is your hymen, the menstrual blood would never come out. This is an actual medical condition called an imperforate hymen. And if this
Mm.
happens, you have to go to the doctor and get your hymen surgically. You have to get a surgical cut, an incision on the hymen to drain out the menstrual blood. So the hymen is not, it's not a, like a sealed door or anything of that sort. It is
Mm.
just a thin
Right.
membrane that's there. On top of it, the hymen is fairly elastic. It's not, it's not like a piece of glass that, if you put a penis in with a lot of force, you're going to break it. I don't know what breaking the hymen means. It's just a piece of membrane that you're going to move to one side of the body, or it's not going to move and it'll accommodate the penis. This also happens, the entire penis can be accommodated in that already existing perforation in the hymen.
Yeah.
And it's also related to myths around virginity. Now, virginity is also something that's very difficult to define. For somebody who
Mm.
has had oral sex, they can say, I'm a virgin. But for
Yeah.
another person, having oral sex is also not a virgin. For
Mm-hmm.
someone, having penis and vagina sex is, not a virgin. But having anal sex, what about
Mm.
that? That's also an orifice that is being penetrated. You are having penetrative sex. So,
Yeah.
virginity is a very difficult question to handle.
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing to remember here is that it is all a social construct. It
Yeah.
means absolutely nothing. There
Mm.
is no medical implication of this. There is no um, scientific implication of this, other than the fact that, historically, people who had never had sex were prized more for some inane reason. But um, there's no meaning of this. Not being a virgin doesn't make you a bad person. Being a virgin doesn't make you a cool person. Not being a virgin doesn't make you a cool person. It's just something we've made up in our heads, and it's
Right.
like the caste system. It's something we made up in our heads, has no use in the world. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, that was so well put. Thank you so much for clearing it. And we really hope someday soon in the future, the books with such false information correct themselves as well. Another assumption made by many gynecologists is if anyone is sexually active, they are dealt in a very heteronormative way. Also, so many people, when dealing with topics like menstruation, they forget that people who identify as women aren't the only ones who menstruate, right? There are many trans, intersex, and non binary folks who do menstruate. This shows that we haven't updated ourselves and our education, leading to a problem of ignorance at a very grassroots level. Being in the medical field, we hold a very strong power in raising right awareness for this as well. So, therefore, it's high time that the medical sector becomes inclusive to everyone. As a doctor, how do you incorporate inclusiveness in your practice?
This is a very important question, and I hope if any future doctors are listening to this, they take notes because this is hugely important. Um, Inclusivity matters, It's so important that you treat your patient with dignity and with kindness, and that dignity and kindness extends to their sexual preference, their pronoun preference, what they want to be addressed as. One of
Mm,
the simplest things you can do, and this is more for people who are in private practice, is that I tend to do is that you state your pronouns from the get-go. I
mm,
refer to myself as she and her, and that's how I would like to be addressed. And also have a little sticker somewhere that this is a safe space for LGBTQ people, or people who are from marginalized communities, or people who have generally faced discrimination in the healthcare setup. After
mm,
this, another thing you can do is you can respect their autonomy. Please don't dictate to your patients that, okay, this is what you should be doing, and you should not be having sex with another woman, or you should not be having sex with another man, or whatever the fuck. Sorry.
mhm,
um, you have to be very careful in asking questions that are open and that are non-judgmental. So instead of asking how long have you been married for, ask, like we addressed, how long have you been sexually active for. Instead of
mm,
asking, tell me about your boyfriend, ask, tell me about your partner, because that way it gives them the space to not tell you what their partner's gender is in case they don't want to, or if
yeah.
they want to, they can take it up in their own which way, their own
Mhm,
their own convenient way. And on top of this, it's a very important thing we tend to miss out is, aside from taking the history and using kind, non-judgmental, inclusive language, is that when you do the examination, explain it to your patient and explain it to them that you know I'm going to be putting a speculum inside you and it will feel cold, so they don't feel violated in any way. Because particularly in obstetrics and gynecology, obstetric violence is a real thing. A lot of people who are in labor are slapped and pinched, and you know verbal
okay.
violence also exists when somebody is delivering a baby. The labor process is it's traumatic, and it's also very rewarding, and it should not be
Mhm,
tinged with a hint of trauma in any way. So this is where
mm,
the most extreme example of that can be seen. But obstetric and gynecological violence is very real. Somebody is
mm,
opening up with a very, very personal thing. We treat the genitals as a very, very private thing, and
mhm,
you are coming into somebody's very personal, private space. So treat it with that dignity and treat it with that
right.
respect. And I feel like that's all. That it will make a world of difference. The right language and the right attitude will make a world of difference to how comfortable people feel. And if they don't trust you, you can't be a good doctor.
That was really informative as well as so important to know as medical personals, and I hope every medical student is taking notes right now on what Dr. Tania just said. Now let's talk about masturbation. So there still remains much silence around women's masturbation, as if women are not supposed to do it, while men are congratulated for doing it since a very young age. Women's pleasure is still something that is out of understanding to many men and even many women, as they haven't self-explored. Majority of the women don't even get to experience an orgasm in their lifetime. So, do you think this is more about the so called complex female biology, or is it that the society still gets weirdly offended by the idea of female pleasure?
Um, it's people get offended at the idea of female pleasure, and B, I don't think the biology is complicated at all. The problem with it is that
Yeah.
we've never been
Mhm,
taught the right biology. The entire time, if you
mm,
Yes.
look at any, Google movie orgasm clip, and you will see that, it'll show a vagina owning person having an orgasm while being penetrated.
Mm.
And
mhm,
less than
Mm.
20% of vagina owners experience vaginal orgasms. Then why
yeah.
is that the mainstream or the only representation of female orgasms that we get? It is the only representation we get. The body of the
Yes.
clitoris, which is the homologous structure to the penis, is
Yeah.
the body of the clitoris was the entirety of it was mapped in 2005, 15 years ago.
Oh.
Yes. Mm. Yes.
Okay.
That gives us a very good insight into how poorly this is a subject that has been, how poorly this subject has been dealt with, how
Mm.
uh, sorely lacking we are in information around the clitoris, which is the main
Absolutely.
sexual organ. The main sexual organ. And there's a lot of people who tend to extrapolate from the existing data, including me, that all orgasms are
Mm.
clitoral orgasms. If you want to talk about a vaginal orgasm, that comes from the indirect stimulation of the clitoris. If you want to talk about what we
Mm.
call the G spot, which is the clitoral urethral vaginal complex, it's called the CUV complex, and I
Ah,
think
okay.
Oh.
also
Mm.
stems from indirect stimulation of the clitoris. Of course, clitoral orgasms come from clitoral orgasms, and the most famous proponent of vaginal and clitoral orgasms was this famous psychoanalyst called Dr. Sigmund Freud, and he's said to have changed
Mm.
the history and the view of psychology. And Freud actually used to say that there are two kinds of orgasms that vagina owners experience, which is that clitoral orgasms are experienced by the immature people, and vaginal orgasms are
Okay.
experienced by the mature people. Now, my problems here are twofold. The first is that what does he mean by immature and mature people? And
Yeah.
being sexually mature is not a good thing in our conservative societies.
Mm.
So it's a you can't win situation. You can't be sexually mature because then you will be slut shamed. But if you're immature,
Yeah.
you will have this label of immaturity because you can only have clitoral orgasms. You can't experience a deeper, more real vaginal orgasm. So, you can't win in any way. And the other is that this is a
Mm-hmm.
person who does not have a clitoris and who doesn't know how it functions. So how is he going to tell everybody how it works and what happens there? So,
Mm.
deeply
Right.
problematic sentiment and deeply
Mm.
uneducated sentiment, and it has stuck around in popular culture even now. And it's time we bring the clitoris to the table and we bring it under the spotlight and we talk about how the clitoris is the way orgasms and pleasure happen. There's no other way around it.
Mm.
Yes, as Rachel would put it, no uterus, no opinions, right? Um, Also, would you please tell us the importance of masturbation and self exploration to clear all misunderstandings around it?
First thing that I do want to say is that nobody should feel pressure to masturbate, and if you're feeling uncomfortable about how much you're masturbating, you can speak to people who can help you. Having said that,
Mm.
Mm.
masturbation is all right. Masturbation is not a bad thing. Masturbation has positive effects on the health. It is not something that will make you lose hair. It is not something that will make you go blind. It is not something that will ruin your fertility. And
Yeah.
absolutely nothing of this sort, that if you become used to masturbation, then without a vibrator you can't feel the real thing, because people tend to forget that a person uses a vibrator on their clitoris, not inside their vagina. And then they expect people to have an orgasm from penetrative vaginal sex. Of course it's not going to happen. um, so there are lots of health benefits to masturbation. The first being it is a good space for self exploration, like you mentioned. um,
Mm.
the inherent risk that comes with any sexual activity is the risk of sexually transmitted infections. So this is the
Mm.
bonus of masturbation. You're not exposed to anybody else, so you're safe from all kinds of STIs. This is the only way to be safe from an STI. Like
Mm.
100% safe from an STI. And other than that, it gives you a very good
Mm.
space to explore what you like and you dislike, because you know a lot of people, the popular idea of sexuality is man and woman who have sex in bed. What if
Mm.
Mm.
you're not heterosexual? What if you're non-binary? What if you identify as another gender? What if there's so many variables out there. There's an entire spectrum. And if you know yourself better, it automatically makes for better communication and better partnership with your partner. If you both try to figure out both of the, it's like building an IKEA table. If you have a manual, it's easier to build that table.
Mm.
If there's two people in that room who don't
Mm-hmm.
have a manual and want to build a table from what they've seen on TV, that okay, this is how they build a table, is going to be very difficult. So you can come with your own manual and you can make your life easier and you can make sex more pleasurable and more fulfilling.
Right, right. Thank you so much for the information. We really hope to see a better future regarding sexuality and pleasure, right? And I guess that's the end of our discussion. We really had an amazing, insightful discussion with you. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I think that's it. I just want to say that, don't fall for misinformation. Follow the right people, learn from the right sources, rely on your textbooks, and if
Hmm.
you have questions, address it to, people who would know instead of following random influencers. And sex is not a bad thing. Sex is how we're all here.
Mm.
So let's celebrate it
Yes.
instead of hide it.
So that brings us to the end of our discussion then. Would you want to tell our listeners where they can follow you?
Absolutely. I'm available on Instagram at Dr_Cuterus. I'm also on Twitter, but that is very medical. So unless you're a medical student, don't follow me there. And I'm on the same name on Twitter as well.
Okay, thank you so much for making time for us once again. Stay safe. Bye
Bye. Thank you so
bye.
much for having me.